All right, be the market expert. And this is what I want to kick off with. And it says VA issues a temporary fix to allow buyers to pay broker fees. And we all know we've been going through and looking at what's going on with the commission, with actually commissions, not the commission. We've been looking at commissions in the DOJ and the NAR settlement. And one of the big things that we had so many questions on was how in the world is the VA that is already at a disadvantage with everything that they do? How are they going to be able to compete when one of the biggest rules in the VA is that they cannot compensate their broker? And so I think it was like 2 weeks ago, the VA got together and they were like trying to figure this whole thing out. It says the US Department of VA on Tuesday issued a temporary fix that will allow home buyers using VA loans to pay for their real estate agents' commissions, i.e., the broker fees. All right, cool. So all this is doing is just going through and saying, like, hey, no, you can pay your representation. And the big issue, like that we have to keep in mind is this, like as we're going through and we're hearing this whole thing, I was even just talking to an agent or a new agent the other day that was asking me questions around agency as well as being able to pay. And one of the biggest things we have to keep in mind is back in the day, and I truly mean back in the day, that they had this thing called sub agency. And sub agency was this: it was the listing agent was there, and a buyer would walk in, and the buyer had zero representation. And they could use the seller side of representation for themselves. And it wasn't necessarily dual agency, but it felt a lot like dual agency, except for like you still didn't really have any representation. And we got rid of this sub agency by introducing buyer agency. Like that was the fix to make sure that buyers were not getting hosed was this thing called buyer agency. And now we're, some odd years later, 20 plus years later, here we are. And we're saying, oh no, now people are being taken advantage of because of buyer agency. And so what we're probably going to see from here is it's probably going to be in the form of concessions is what I would assume. Like just so that you guys like my thought process around this is there's going to be the concession box. If you were on Coffee Talk the other day, we pulled up the Bright MLS, which is the second largest MLS in the United States. It's not ours, but it's adjacent. It's in California on the West Coast. And they're removing the commissions box. That'll be completely gone. I think as of yesterday, they removed it completely. And they're putting in a concessions box. And it says how much money in concessions that the seller would be willing to give to the buyer. I think that's where we're going to see this show up is that the seller says, I'm willing to offer, $18,000 in concessions. And then that money can be used however the buyer wants to do it. So then you're writing an offer, you see $18,000, you know that your fee with your buyer was X%. Let's call it 2.8 for the sake of this conversation. You were at 2.8%, and there was still some leftover. Well, the buyer would be able to take that money and apply it to loan conditions and other things like that. So this is kind of interesting. This is truly a band-aid. We'll see what this whole thing kind of shakes out. But this was like one of the biggest concerns that we had, like really the only concern that we had as an industry with this NAR settlement, right? Because the NAR settlement, what it was going to do is it was going to remove commissions from the MLS. So that means like we have to negotiate and we have to do some things, and it creates some friction, which we weren't used to in this seamlessly frictionless process. So they did that, and they said you have to have agency agreements. Okay, cool. Like we can navigate all those things, but the biggest issue that we were running into was, oh my God, like this is a federally guaranteed loan that we don't have a Band-Aid for, and they've put the Band-Aid on it, and the Band-Aid really just says if they use a VA loan, they're allowed to pay their buyers agent representation now, which really just tells me they can use concessions because in the grand scheme of things, they probably still don't have $15,000. So the second article that has come out recently was this: homeowners sitting on a pile of cash with $17 trillion in home equity. And this is from CoreLogic. This is interesting, right? It says there are only 1 million homes underwater in the United States. So we look at this thing, it says home equity continued to rise in the first quarter of 2024 as residential properties with mortgages collectively gained $1.5 trillion in equity over the past year. $1.5 trillion in equity over the last 365 days. This is huge, everyone. Like, as we're looking at this thing and we're having these conversations, and this is why, like, people create the type of content that they create, this clickbait, this fear mongering, right? When we talk about housing bust, the bubble, Airbnb bust, silver tsunami. I'm waiting for the housing crash. What housing crash? We're talking that we have had some of the lowest inventory that we've ever had, like pre like 1990s. I think is like this is how low our inventory is right now. And we're looking at this thing and it's saying that we've actually gained $1.5 trillion in equity. And here's what's interesting. This is national data, right? Like, and I don't have Colorado data pulled up to back any of this, but this is what I would say. If we were to look at this a little bit deeper, the biggest thing, if we were looking like Louisiana and some of those like southern East Coast states, they're not gaining equity. So this is unevenly yoked. And what I mean by that is like we look into like Colorado, Washington, California, parts of Texas, because some of this Texas is not doing as well as they were. That you would actually see a lot of the East Coast states right now, like the eastern part of the United States. Those are the states that are actually bringing in this equity. And so when we're having conversations with people in Colorado, like there is nothing, absolutely nothing pointing to a housing recession, housing crash, balloon bubble bust, anything along those lines. $1.5 trillion in equity gain. That means home prices are going up. Home prices are going up. And it says the average US homeowner with a mortgage added $28,000 in equity during the year ending in March. So 365 days, March 2023 to March 2024, the average homeowner in the United States put another $28,000 in equity. Guys, when we talk about what this looked like in The Big Short. And again, like you hear me talk about The Big Short. If you haven't seen it, that's your homework. I think it's on Netflix. Go watch The Big Short. And as you're looking at The Big Short and you're watching that movie, they were doing a lot of funny stuff. There was funny money. It was if you could fog a mirror, you can get a mortgage. You could fog another mirror, you can get another mortgage. And these people were collecting houses. And this is where the term zombie foreclosure came from. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But if you're looking at this thing, we have some of the best balance sheets as homeowners that we've ever had as a society. Like we have well-qualified borrowers, some of the best qualified borrowers that we have ever had. And the balance sheet on their houses, right? If their house was a bank, they have some of the strongest balance sheets that we've ever seen. They are positive. They are net positive. And so I said zombie foreclosure, and this is the issue that we had. The biggest issue that what we had back when we had that housing crash was this. People were going into banks and they were saying, hey, I want to borrow a loan to go get some money to go buy a house. And they said, no big deal, sign here. And they were able to go buy a house. And then the banker would say, are you interested in buying another house? And the person would be like, heck yes, I would love a second house. That wasn't the issue, right? Because we all on this call were like, cool, like if I'm getting a second, third, fourth house, I'm going to rent it. I'm going to either go short-term, long-term, like I'm going to do all this stuff. They weren't doing that. That's where this term zombie foreclosure came from. And what was happening was these people were getting these second houses, third houses, fourth houses, and they weren't renting them. They weren't living in them. They were just collecting houses to have houses. And then they weren't paying the bills on the houses. They had no income coming in to pay for the houses, and these houses got foreclosed on. So when we're looking at this thing, this is some of the best balance sheets that we've ever had. $17 trillion in home equity for people that have mortgages. And over the last 365 days, March 2023 to March 2024, the average homeowner with a mortgage added $28,000. You know what? If I'm a social media person, I'm probably copying this and I'm throwing it out there. right? Like I'm probably putting something on social media that says, according to CoreLogic, from March 2023 to March 2024, the average U.S. homeowner with a mortgage added $28,000 in home equity. And it says this is the highest year-over-year increase since late 2022. In the three states, California added $64,000, Massachusetts added $61,000, and New Jersey added $59,000 in equity. Guys, that's huge. And they're saying this is more than double. And obviously we can do the math, right? 28,000 times two, we're talking 56K. All these are higher than $56,000. The $1.5 trillion gain in home equity over the past year brought total net equity of more than $17 trillion at the end of Q1 2024. Mortgage properties account for 62% of all residential homes in the United States. Cool. And if we were to look at this, what does that also tell us? That 38% of all homes in the United States don't have a mortgage. 62% of all homes in the United States have a mortgage, and those people with mortgages have around $17 trillion of equity. And then 38% of all homes in the United States don't have a mortgage attached to them. Like, guys, this is gold. Like, there is so much information that we can take out of here and put out there. And what are we going to do with this stuff, right? Like, I'm going to be putting this into conversations as I'm going through. With home prices continuing to reach new heights, homeowners are also seeing their equity approach the historic peaks of 2023, close to a total of $305,000 per owner. With home prices continuing to reach new highs, homeowners are also seeing their equity approach historic peaks of 2023, close to a total of $305,000 per owner. Think of this. Like, when we're talking about home ownership versus renting, these are the conversations that we should be having. Like, this is probably like a piece of paper that I'm printing out and I'm putting in some buyer conversations. Like, this is going in my buyer packet, right? Like, I'm going through, and this isn't a paid piece of mail or a subscription. So I just put the link in there so you guys can go copy. It's not behind a paywall. So this isn't a paywall piece, but like, there's so much gold in this thing, right? $17 trillion in home equity. We're talking that 62% of all properties that are mortgaged have that $17 trillion in equity, which means that 38% of all homes in the United States don't have a mortgage. And we're seeing that there's a close to a total of $305,000 in equity per homeowner. Like, that's huge, everyone. Like, as we look at this, and this is the big thing, we know that most people live in their home for a total of 8 years. Like, that's what the number is right now, 8 years. Most homeowners on average live in their house for 8 years. And it says negative equity, also known as underwater or upside down mortgages, involves borrowers whose outstanding debt exceeds the value of their home. On a quarterly basis, negative equity decreases by 2.1%. And we know this, right? So it decreases by 2.1% because they're making payments, plus the property value is going up. And so that number comes down, right? We have prices going up. And with prices going up, as well as they're paying their mortgage down, that gap gets smaller. So that's how this thing happens, which we totally get. And so when we're thinking about this negative equity, and this is the thing that we have to keep in mind, we're talking about underwater homes, negative equity. The biggest thing is nobody gets hurt unless they go to sell. And for the most part, unless they're a distressed seller, right? Like, they lost their job, they're getting a job transfer, something's happening in this world. They don't need to sell. And that's what we have to keep in mind. And with what we're seeing, 4% year over year, right? 4%, that's what the average home appreciates year over year in the United States, especially here in Colorado. Like, we're in one of the best states for this. That as we're going through and we're looking at this thing, we're getting positive equity position increasing year over year over year. Plus, people are paying down their balances on their home. As long as they don't sell, they are not going to get hurt. And again, the biggest reason why people get hurt because they have to sell is because of the loss of a job. The analysis also noted that the level of underwater mortgages at a given time can change quickly due to changes in home prices. For example, when looking at the level of mortgage debt in Q1 2024, there are 111,000 homes that would move back into a positive equity position if home values rose at least 5%. Conversely, 153,000 homes would fall underwater if they declined. So that's the thing. That's just for information's sake. And again, like you could probably see a headline like this and it says 153,000 homes are at risk of being underwater. Like that could be a headline in the grand scheme of things, but it's not, because this is what we have to keep in mind. We are bringing, our population is increasing every year, whether it's people moving into the United States and or birth, right? Like our population is getting bigger and bigger. And there is not enough homes. We do not have enough homes on the market. There's not enough inventory. There's no world that we outbuild and build our way out of this. And so as we're going through, there's nothing that is pointing to homes decreasing in value unless there's war, right? Like unless we go to war. And at that point, I don't think anybody cares what their home value is, right? Like we're probably going back to the days where we're worried about how much TP we have, right? So be thinking about that. Like as we're going through, there's nothing on the scale, there's nothing in the horizon that's showing us decrease in value in our home unless war happens. And at that point, again, I don't think anyone's watching their stock portfolio and their home values and everything, because we got bigger things to worry about. So this is a pretty good, cool article. Again, I just threw that link in the chat. This isn't behind a paywall, so you should be able to pull this up and get a lot of good stuff out of here. And I'm probably putting it again in some buyer presentations. If you're using social media, I'm probably grabbing some of these things and peppering social media here and there with it. And so every week we go through this. This is Logan Motoshami, the lead analyst for Housing Wire. And it says, this is Friday. And so this is rear view facing data. How much longer will we have to deal with high mortgage rates? And here's the thing. Who knows? It says, given last week's surprising job report, how much longer will we have to deal with higher mortgage rates? The labor data will be key to answering that question. It's essential to track the labor data along with inflation, because the key to getting lower mortgage rates for longer lies with the labor data more than inflation. So all this is saying is this. We do have inflationary problems in the United States right now. We can look at this, and you guys, I was shocked the other day. I typically buy my eggs from either Costco or Sam's Club, and I'm buying them like 48 eggs at a time. And now you guys are all like, Charles, you don't have kids. Why are you going through 48 eggs? I eat a lot of eggs. And with that being said, I ran out and I had to go to King Soopers, and I was shocked that they were like $10 for 12 eggs at King Soopers. That's inflation, right? Like if we were to go back and start tracking this, this is probably was like $3, $4 a couple of years back, and now we're up to $10 for 12 eggs. And so that's inflation, but this is saying that the inflation isn't the biggest thing that we need to worry about right now when it comes to housing and interest rates. Interest rates are going to be driven by how well the economy is doing in the sense of people having jobs and how much money employers are paying those people with jobs. Like that's the only thing that we're worrying about right now. Like that is the biggest indicator with what the federal government or what the Fed is going to do with these interest rates, with the cost of money. So we have a job loss recession Fed, which means that they want to see people lose jobs. And if they're losing jobs, then they're going to make the cost of money less. And they're saying that more people have jobs so they can afford it. And they're trying to persuade people not to go out and buy houses. Like that is what they're trying to do. And it's not necessarily just houses, but we own and we sell the most expensive product out there, right? We sell real estate. When we're talking about cars, we're talking about Amazon purchases, we're talking about all this other stuff. Like we are the gatekeepers for the most expensive item that people purchase. And so we are unproportionately affected when these interest rates go up as far as our profession, because when we're talking about a $700,000 purchase at a 7% interest rate, there's going to be a lot less people that are raising their hand that are rushing out to go spend that kind of money. Whereas like I could go onto Amazon, I'm like, oh, cool, $30. And it's just going to go on my credit card. Like there's a different mentality that's going around. So the federal government, they're raising rates on money, which is going to disproportionately directly affect the housing market because of the cost of that item, and less people will go out and buy houses. And that's what we're seeing. unless it's talking about the affluent, right? And when we keep talking about these conversations and we're talking about these $1.5 million buyers, 1.2, $900,000 up, we're actually seeing a lot of like multiple bids, multiple offer situations. Whereas we get into the lesser price points, we're seeing less on there because of the cost of money being where it is. Inflation is a threat to our democracy. It really is. Like when you talk about the lower class and the upper class, it puts a bigger gap, because when we're talking about affluent buyers, people with a lot of money, they don't care about interest rates, right? They have the money to be able to do different things. Whereas our lower class, every single dollar matters. So inflation separates the two. And it actually pulls the middle class apart, right? It depends on where you are in the middle class. It's either going to start carrying you up or it's going to send you down. And so it separates people further and further. So if we keep seeing good jobs data and people are still making a lot of money, the federal government or the Fed is not enticed to lower rates, and they won't. They will not lower rates if we are seeing great employment. 10-year yield, we're not going to touch that with mortgage rates. We're not going to touch this, but let's talk about purchase application data. The seasonality of purchase application data is over as volume typically starts to fall after May. However, we always keep track of the data because if rates fall, like they did late in 2022 and 2023, we need to keep track. And so we've always talked about how seasonal our real estate markets are. Like we are in a very seasonal industry. And we talk about it, right? We go to sleep as jack-o'-lanterns, we wake up as Easter bunnies, like selling season. And so things start to slow down around the summer months. Kids are out of school. Like life is busy. Like this is a busy, busy time. And just think like how many vacations you guys have been on, how many vacations you guys are planning on going on, all these different things. And so we can see this. Here's your purchase application data. Here's 2022, 2023. And here we are, like, and then this black line's the basement. And like we were in the crawl space a little bit underneath the basement. Now, like we can touch the basement and like we're jumping off the floor a little bit, but like we're in the basement. Like there's not a whole lot of people raising their hand. But this is the thing. The big thing that we need to watch is with these jobs reports, because if the jobs report data gets worse than what it is, then the government, the Fed, is going to be looking to lower rates. Like that is their only bar at this point. Like that is their only bar. And we have to keep in mind this. When we talk about our sector, we are the largest sector as far as goods that are built and sold in the United States, right? Like when we start talking about cars and everything else, like just think about like your computer chips for your cell phone, for your car, like that's built out of the country. That's in a different place. But in the United States, we build our own houses. And with that being said, what we're also seeing is this. We're also seeing, while the apartments, we're seeing less applications for building. So permitting are going down and breaking ground is going down. So they're not pulling the permits and they're not breaking ground as much as they were. Same thing with multifamily. And we're starting to see single family a little bit more as well. So we're seeing 3 less people pulling permits and people breaking ground. So what does that mean? That means that the biggest cohort of like jobs that we truly have as far as construction goes, those people are going to start losing their jobs. Like those are going to be some of the biggest impacted people. We're talking about trade labor. We're talking about your tilers. We're talking about your electricians, your plumbers, like all these people that are employed. They're going to, whether they're working by the piece or they're working for the company, we're going to see less and less of them employed. And that sector is going to take a little bit of a hit. But that little bit of a hit, we could see mortgage rates go down. And with mortgage rates going down, we could see this going up. And so this is the big reason why we need to keep having the conversations, because there's people on the sidelines. Like the biggest thing that we need to keep in mind is there are people that are still on the sidelines that want to buy a house. They just can't afford it. They can't justify the monthly payment. And they're just waiting for an interest rate to change. And we don't know what that interest rate is. That might be 50 basis points. That might be 200 basis points, right? We don't know. We don't know what they're looking for to make their house more affordable. We just know that we need to be there. We need to take massive mind share, systematically, strategically communicate out to these people. So when their hand does come up and they say, you know what, I am ready to buy a house, like they're thinking about us. Like that's the only thing that we can be doing is educating, educating, educating. And that's why I really do like this article, right, guys? Like, take this article and do some stuff with it. So purchase application, we're in the basement. Like, that's all we need to know. We were in the basement. You can see historically, like, there's these little bumps, and that's what they were talking about. Because if we were to look at like real past data, it really does like dips off. Like, it's really, really high up here and we're flying, and then it dips off dramatically, just because of the seasonality and what's happening in people's worlds. But again, we are not in a normal market. 2019 was the last normal market we've seen in a very, very long time. 2020 broke a lot of stuff. And what that's saying is everything that is happening right now that is being dictated in the housing market is interest rate driven. And on top of that, it's inventory driven. Because of the lack of inventory, that's why our prices are still so high. Even though we don't have a lot of buyers going out and buying houses, there's still no homes. So where we would think that these numbers would change and we see prices start going down because interest rates are so high, there's not enough inventory. That's why our prices are staying high as well. So mortgage application data, low. We're in the basement. And then weekly inventory. So if we look at the weekly inventory, it says we can't stress enough that the best story 2024 has been active inventory and new listings is growing. Like, that's what we need. We need inventory. Like, that's the biggest thing. It says the fact that we hit that level 3 times this year is a plus. If mortgage rates are high at 7.25% or higher, we should get some weekly inventory growth between 11,000 and 17,000 homes. This week, we only saw 6,000. So this is, again, like, people, I think, right, and we talking about Logan. Logan's an interesting guy because Logan doesn't believe in the lock-in effect. He really doesn't think that interest rates are locking people in the way that I do. I believe that we have a real lock-in effect, the golden handcuffs, if you will. And Logan saying, no, that's not a real thing. That's a phenomenon that you guys are pretending. But if we were to look at this, it says weekly inventory change, May 31st through June 7th. Inventory rose from 604 to 611. Same time last year, which is June 2nd to June 9th, inventory rose from 437 to 443. All-time inventory bottom of 2022, 240,000 homes. And this week this week is the inventory peak of 2024. So you can see this, like, it's being represented right here. Here we are in 2024. We're getting more and more inventory. This is the thing. It's not new builds. Like, we're not seeing a bunch of new builds sit on the market. Right now, we're seeing motivated sellers that are putting their home on the market. They can't wait any longer. They've been waiting, right? All the people on CNN and Fox and YouTube and Twitter have been saying, it's coming. The crash is coming. The crash is coming. Interest rates are going to go down. Interest rates are going to go down. And guess what? They didn't. This is why that date the rate, marry the house propaganda is very, very dangerous, right? Because, like, as we're looking at this thing, we haven't seen it for 2 years now. We have not seen interest rates go down. So we're seeing more and more inventory. And as we're looking, this is where we want to be. We want to be in this 2019 through 2017 area. And we're rising and we're rising and we're rising. This is actually good. We want to be here. We just know that our inventory is going up just because rates are so high. I don't think this is sustainable, because here's the thing. Interest rates tomorrow go down to 5%. This number plummets, absolutely plummets. Then we're looking over here, like, see 2021. This is the world that we live in. If rates start going back down, like, we live somewhere in here along this line, because inventory will not be sitting on the market as long. It will be out of here. And so this is artificially created by interest rates, is what I'm saying. So in this new listings data, 2024, 72,000 homes, 2023, 63,000, and 2022, 85,000 homes. We're looking for more houses. We need to say and be there. It says, I hope that we would be at 95,000 homes this year. And that was more of a common practice in the past decades. So that's what we're really looking for. Here we are, national single family homes, new listings. Here's our new listing data, going through and kind of just looking at it, and then price cuts. So 2024, we're sitting at 36%. 2023, we were at 31%. 2022, we were at 26%. Historically speaking, we know that 1/3 of all homes in the United States take a price cut. And so we're right in line. Even with the inventory and interest rates and everything that's happening, we're right in line with what should be 33%. We're going to call it 36%. We're still going to call it 1/3. So here we are right here. And you can see that it started rising here towards the end of these years. 2022, we saw this drastic spike right here. And keep in mind, guys, what was happening? Interest rates. Interest rates started taking off like this hockey stick right here. And this is why we started seeing all these price decreases happening, because money was expensive and people were shocked. Like, this is the fastest timeline that we ever saw interest rates rise as much as they had. And it was right here. And you can see this is when price decreases really picked up. Pending sales. So one of the new data lines that we're going to start incorporating, which is pretty cool. So this is Altos data, and they're going to start bringing this into our Friday tracker that we review on Tuesdays, is that we can actually see pending home sales. So if we were to look at here, this is the thing, guys, like interest rates. Interest rates are north of 7%, right? Not prime, prime's lower, but we're talking about like most people, like most Americans, their interest rates are probably closer to, 7 plus. 393,636 homes pending right now. Now we know that some homes are going to come back on the market. But you can see this is better than 2023, not as good as 2022, but people are still out there buying and selling. And inflation and Fed week. So last week we had a crazy jobs week, and we're going to straight into the fire of the CPI inflation and Fed meeting on Wednesday. So they're going to look at the inflation. They're going to see the cost of everything and where it is, and they're going to make a decision. What we all need to be going home and praying, or, your affirmations or whatever you do. We don't want the Fed to get hawkish. We don't want the Fed to go out and say, we're going to do something with interest rates and make them higher, or even indicate that that's what they're going to do. Because if they do it, that's where we start seeing weird stuff happening in our markets. So we just want the Fed to go out there saying this is kind of what we expected, and just for them to just play it cool. If they play it cool, nothing weird's going to happen. And we definitely don't want to see anything happening with CPI data plus the jobs that we had. So let's take a look at interest rates. So I told you, right, that we're probably closer, 7.25. So conforming is 6.995. It's gone up almost 50 basis points, right? So we're looking at this thing and we're going through. This is where it gets interesting. 6.99. And then if we were to look at FHA, 6.762. So going in and having these conversations, here's January 2nd, we can see we're at 665 and 652. And this is where we're hovering today, 6.9 and 6.7. Now, this has been going up. There's been some minor jolts here and there, but for the most part, our interest rates, they're going up. And so these are the conversations that we're going to be having to have and being comfortable explaining. And again, it's really because of the Fed. Like, the Fed's going through and they're trying to stop the consumer from spending money. And this is the only way that they can, is to make it more expensive. Now, again, we're directly and proportionally affected by interest rates because of the cost of our product that we sell, which is real estate. Again, people go into this thing and they go into Amazon and they go and they order stuff and they pay $2 to have it overnighted and all that. And they don't think about it because, 7% on $3 on $3 on $30 on whatever, like, they don't think about that. But when you're talking about a $700,000 product, which is what we're selling in Colorado, these rates, like, you feel it. Like, you have to make, we are talking about an interest percentage of a couple $1,000s versus like $2. These are the conversations people are having. So you can see, like, we're going up. It came down a little bit, but then it's spiking back up. And this is because of the jobs data that came out. So we jump into Altos data and we look at Arvada. So you can see that our prices have gone down a little bit, and they're kind of living down here a little bit. So in Arvada, the median list price is $736,000, and new listings coming on is 700. So we saw a little bit of a gap. I think last week when we looked, these numbers were about the same. Prices were coming onto the market at the same price that there was listings around there. And now we're actually seeing new homes hitting the market at a lesser price point that's already priced. And this is smart, right? Like, this is what we should all be doing. When we're going out and giving these CMAs and we're having these conversations with our sellers, we should be letting them know, like, your competition's the house that's for sale down the street, not what your neighbor sold like 2 years ago, right? We're not looking at rear view facing data from Zillow back in 2021. Yes, totally get that, but that's not who your competition is. Your competition is the Joneses 4 doors down that has their house on the market for 736. So let's come at a lower price point and let's show better and be at a lesser price. And guess what? We're the prettiest person at the dance and they're going to want to come talk to us. Like that's the whole game here. So this isn't surprising. This is kind of what we all should be doing. Now, I don't know if we need to take this big of a haircut, but again, this is median data. So this is just going through top, lower, and they're working their way into the middle. Price per square foot, 277, average days on market versus median. Again, the overpriced homes are sitting on the market for 43 days. This number has gone down. I would say it's probably due to inventory. And again, in Colorado, we're in a different market. So there's more people raising their hands because you're not coming into Colorado at a high price point and not being able to afford what we have going on. This is where we're seeing the people that are, either being pushed out or something with the price point of Colorado, they're going to other states. As we're looking at this 43 days on markets on average, overpriced homes, this is where we're sitting, but median price, where we're taking out all the outliers, 21 days. This is why we want to live at a lower price point. So we're not here. Conversations with our sellers. What's the most important things? The days on market or is it price? And going through and figuring out what their motivations are. Price decreases 45%. So that's interesting, right? So when we're talking about this $736,000 median price point, and when we're seeing new homes come in at $699 and we have these motivated sellers, 45% of all homes in Arvada have a price decrease. So as we're looking at this thing and we're talking about national data, all homes in the United States, 36% of them have a price cut. And we're talking about Arvada specifically, 45. We're a little bit out of line here. And again, it's because we're using Zillow data and we're letting feelings dictate what we're putting these homes on the market for. And these are the conversations that we really need to have. 2%, guys, this just goes to show, like, these are new homes. Price increases are new homes, stage or phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, stuff like that. This is showing you that the inventory that we have on the market, these are not new homes. These are pre-existing, these are resales. So only 2% of all homes had a price increase. And that truly tells me these are brand new builds, which isn't data that excites me, but you can actually see this huge dip right here. New builds are not coming to save anybody. We're not going to outbuild this housing shortage that we're in. Relisted, 6%. We get that, right? 6% of all homes are being relisted. That's because at 7% interest rates, we have discerning buyers. These buyers are saying, you know what? Based off how much I'm paying for this house, I'm not willing to accept this, this, and this on this home. Or we're getting to a place where we're getting to an inspection objection and we're not getting to the resolution where both parties are satisfied and they're walking away. 6% of all homes in Arvada are being relisted. The inventory 222, median rent 3,110, and it gave it a 58. And I think this is the first time in a couple of weeks we've seen this. This is saying that we are not in the same seller's market that we were last month. So we're at a lesser of a seller's market based off of all this data. If we were to look at this month versus last month, they're saying that this is not as strong of a seller's market as we have previously been in.